Hey guys, tonight we journey back to a time of castles and cloaks of thrones and thunderous footsteps echoing through cold stone halls. You're not just anyone tonight, you're the king. The actual king of a medieval realm with all the weight and weirdness that entails. But don't get too excited. Sure, you have a crown, a fancy ring, and servants who flinch when you sneeze, but you're also sleeping in a bed that's colder than a lizard's handshake. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love seeing how far this little kingdom reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up to the sound of nothing, which is somehow louder than noise. A silence so thick it almost presses against your chest. The chamber is dark, the fire's embers long gone cold, and the wind moans through the cracks in the stone walls like a ghost with a toothache. Your eyelids flutter open. A carved canopy of oak looms above you, the posts wrapped in moth-eaten velvet. Your royal mattress is a sack of straw, more lump than cushion. You shift slightly and regret it. Your hip bone grinds against a knot of hardened stuffing. So much for royal comfort. You're wrapped in layers, a linen shirt, thick woolen sheets, and a bearskin that smells suspiciously like wet dog. It's not enough. Even kings can't command warmth when the castle has no insulation and it's the middle of a damp English winter. You can see your breath. You groan. Not a majestic lion-like roar, more like a disgruntled mule. At the foot of the bed, you spot a faint shape. A servant boy asleep upright on a stool chin resting on his knees. He's supposed to be ready the moment you stir, just in case you want water or prayer or someone to shout at. His job is to anticipate your needs. Yours is to pretend you don't have any. You clear your throat. Loudly, the boy jolts awake and nearly topples over. Sire. Yes, right away. He scurries like a squirrel on fire, summoning the others. Within seconds, soft, slippered feet echo outside the chamber. The door creaks open and a flood of torchlight pours in. A half-dozen servants file in each with a job more peculiar than the last. One is here just to hold your undergarments over the fire so they're warm. Another has a silver basin and a cloth soaked in rosewater to dab your face. You squint as someone draws back the velvet curtains around your bed. "Good morning, Your Majesty," they chant in eerie unison as if you've summoned them from the underworld. Your body creaks worse than the floorboards. Sleeping on straw and wood planks does that. Your royal joints, blessed by God, allegedly still feel like they've been used to joust with a battering ram, and you're expected to go hunting later. Wonderful. A chamberlain approaches with your schedule. Yes. A medieval to-do list. As king, your day is meticulously planned from when you should wash behind your ears to what time you'll be blessing bread and pretending to care about border disputes. The only spontaneous part of your life is digestion, and even that is frowned upon if it happens during Mass. The window's tiny slits in the thick stone wall let in barely any light, but someone's already tracking the sun. "6 of the clock, sire," mutters an old man with a candle stub and a sundial. You're pretty sure doesn't work indoors. You sit up, head heavy, the chill biting at your neck. Your crown isn't here, of course it lives in a locked coffer guarded by 2 men with halberds and no sense of humour. But you still carry its weight metaphorically. You sigh, rubbing your temples. Your morning has begun and already you envy the peasant who woke up in a pile of hay snuggled next to a pig. At least that guy doesn't have to arbitrate 3 duels before lunch. Historians still argue whether medieval kings truly woke this early or whether their days began later depending on their personal whims. But one thing's clear: once you're awake, your kingdom is too. And not everyone's happy about that. The moment you swing your legs out of bed gingerly because that stone floor is colder than a bishop's glare, your private army of attendants kicks into high gear. They move like a well-rehearsed dance troupe. Except no one is smiling and half of them look like they haven't slept in 3 days. One servant offers a wooden stool for you to sit on. Another kneels to pull a heavy tunic over your head, his face politely blank as he gets an up-close encounter with your royal armpit. A third brushes your hair with stiff bristles soaked in lavender oil, tugging at a knot that's been in there since the Crusades. You wince. "Apologies, sire," he mumbles but keeps brushing. Yes, this is the daily routine. You don't dress yourself, why would you? That's what lower-born people do. You haven't put on your own socks since the year of the Great Bread Shortage. Speaking of socks, yours are thick, scratchy wool hand-knitted by nuns and lined with rabbit fur. Fashionable perhaps, but about as breathable as a leather dungeon. Today's garments are layered: a linen undershirt, a velvet tunic embroidered with your family crest, a wide leather belt with more buckles than purpose, and an overcoat so stiff it might walk out on its own. There's a ceremonial dagger tucked into your sash, not for stabbing, mind you, but just in case a dramatic pause during breakfast needs a little flair. By the time your boots are strapped on each with 10 iron hooks and a buckle that only 2 people in the kingdom know how to tie, you're sweating under all those clothes despite the cold. And the boots, they squeak, loudly. With every step you sound like an angry mouse. In the middle of this dressing ritual, the steward of the chamber rushes in, cheeks flushed. "Your Majesty, the stable master, sends word your horse threw a shoe again." You blink. That's the 3rd time this month. Either that horse hates being a royal or someone's sneaking laxatives into the feed. Still seated, you accept a goblet of warm spiced wine. Yes, wine at this hour, because the water's not safe to drink and royal dehydration simply won't do. One gulp burns its way down your throat and you almost feel alive. Almost. As the bustle continues, a man enters with a long scroll and an unfortunate moustache. He's your schedule keeper, and he reads aloud your morning itinerary with a seriousness usually reserved for announcing plagues. At 7th hour breakfast with the Bishop of Rouen, 8th hour audience with petitioners, 9th hour review of fortification repairs, 10th sword practice. You groan. Sword practice again. You haven't lifted a blade since that unfortunate incident with the training dummy that turned out to be your cousin's wedding gift. But appearances must be kept. The man nods gravely, pretending not to notice your disdain. It would be unwise to cancel. The knights talk. Of course they do. Everyone talks. Being king means you're less a person and more a rumour generator in human form. If you so much as sneeze, 3 barons and a baker's wife will swear you're dying. Historians still argue whether the exact number of attendants surrounding medieval kings was as high as some records suggest dozens, even hundreds, depending on rank and region. But one thing is certain: you're never alone. Privacy is for the dead and disgraced. A boy arrives with a tray, not breakfast, just gloves, velvet lined with tiny pearls sewn into the cuffs. Not that you'll wear them for more than 5 minutes, but someone spent 2 weeks making them. You nod. He bows so low you worry he'll snap in half. Meanwhile, another servant is on knee duty, literally. He helps you stretch and flex your legs to prepare for the long hours of standing you'll endure. Your knees creak like medieval siege engines. And don't even ask about your back. Let's just say gravity hasn't been your friend since your coronation. One of your pages, barely 12 eyes wide with terror, holds up a polished bronze mirror. Your reflection looks back, regal, tired, slightly hungover. A real lord of the realm, king of all he surveys, and possibly has indigestion kind of vibe. You force a smile. The boy smiles back nervously, and you realise that your teeth, despite the mint and sage rinse, still look like they've seen some battles. You rise. The room stills. It's time to step into the corridor and start pretending you actually control your life. Every pair of eyes follows you from servants to guards, to that one courtier who always seems to be lurking behind the tapestry. You walk slowly, boots squeaking, cloak dragging, and with each step the gears of the kingdom begin to turn. A living, breathing mechanism built around one idea, that your will is law. Except, of course, when the Queen disagrees. You haven't made it 10 paces from your chamber when your nostrils catch something. No, not the sweet smell of fresh bread baking in the castle kitchens. That would be far too kind. Instead, it's the unmistakable scent of roasted meat, heavy, rich, and loose and clinging to the air like an overeager aunt. Breakfast is being prepared. Down the winding stone steps, you go flanked by 2 guards who look bored enough to fall asleep standing. One scratches under his helmet, the other yawns audibly. They both snap to attention when you glance their way, but too late. You'll remember that. Maybe. The great hall awaits, already buzzing. Torches flicker in the cold morning gloom, casting long shadows against the banners of your ancestors, those gloriously painted dead people who glare down as if daring you to outdo them. No pressure. At the long oak table near the hearth, breakfast has been laid out like a feast fit for you. The spread is overwhelming platters of salted ham, greasy blood sausages, cold roast lamb, thick wedges of cheese the size of bricks, loaves of dark bread so tough you could use them as building materials, and bowls of boiled barley porridge that wiggle just a little too much. You sit and your chair creaks ominously. A steward rushes forward to tuck a napkin into your collar. It's embroidered with golden thread because obviously wiping your royal mouth with anything less than a fortune would be uncivilized. You're handed a pewter cup of ale, breakfast ale, because hydration is important, and as we've already established, nobody drinks the water unless they have a death wish or are already on their way out. You take a sip. It's warm, sour, and oddly comforting. Your first bite is a slab of meat so heavily spiced it kicks you in the teeth. You chew slowly, trying to recall if this is venison or boar. Could be badger. You don't ask. Royalty doesn't question what it's served, it simply eats, then threatens people afterward if it didn't agree with them. Across from you, your younger brother slumps into a seat. He's wearing last night's clothes and a suspicious bruise on his temple. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Just a misunderstanding with the Duke of Galloway's son, he mutters, reaching for a drumstick. You file that away for later. Misunderstandings between noble families tend to turn into misunderstandings involving flaming arrows and sieges. A monk shuffles into the hall and murmurs a short Latin blessing over the food. You mumble along more out of habit than holiness. Everyone crosses themselves and then immediately returns to stuffing their faces. Historians still argue whether royal breakfasts were truly this decadent every day or if it varied by region and supply. But one thing is clear, a medieval king didn't go hungry unless he was being starved on purpose. You pick at the barley. It's tasteless, lumpy, and somehow still crunchy. Next to it sits a delicacy eel pie. The crust is flaky, the insides gelatinous. You take a bite. It squirms down your throat. Charming. You wash it down with more ale. Then come the soft-boiled eggs. or as soft as eggs can be when boiled in a pot, hanging above a smoky hearth for hours. One cracks open to reveal a yolk the consistency of wet clay. Delicious. Your royal physician sits nearby watching your intake with concern. He occasionally coughs into a handkerchief and whispers to your steward, probably about your humours being imbalanced or how the eel might disturb your inner fire. You ignore him. The man still recommends leeches for headaches. As you eat, a minstrel enters and begins to pluck a lute. It's a sweet, sleepy tune, something about springtime and maidens, but you can't hear the lyrics over the crunch of roasted pig skin in your mouth. A leg of pork is set before you, studded with cloves. You tear into it like a man possessed. You catch your reflection in a goblet and pause. There's a bit of fat clinging to your chin. You nod to a page boy who rushes over with a cloth, cleaned like a painting before Mass. You grunt in thanks, which in royal language is practically a sonnet. Just as you're starting to feel full, a server presents a final course, a custard tart flavoured with cinnamon, an exotic spice, expensive and imported. You take a bite. It's divine. Soft sweet, and briefly reminds you why being king is slightly better than being dead in a ditch. And yet, the moment your goblet is refilled and the last morsel cleared, your steward reappears with that blasted scroll again. Your Grace. It's time for morning prayer and the audience chamber is being prepared. You sigh, standing slowly. Your stomach grumbles a warning, not a complaint. You've eaten more than a peasant family will this week, and your waistband knows it. You glance at the table as you leave. Most of the food will go to the guards, the dogs, or if you're feeling generous, the poor outside the gates. Unless your brother claims it first. He's already licking his fingers, eyeing the leftover pie. Breakfast is over. It's time to be king again. The great hall quiets behind you as you make your way through the winding inner corridors of your castle's stone walls, so thick you could host a small banquet inside one. The flickering torchlight paints shaky shadows, and the air carries that familiar scent of old wax-burnt tallow and something faintly resembling mildew-covered parchment. Or maybe that's just the bishop. You enter the chapel through a narrow archway. It's small by cathedral standards, but within your castle, it's the holiest corner where incense smoke curls in lazy spirals and stained glass saints watch you with eyes that seem just a little too judgmental. They know. A kneeling cushion awaits you at the front. It's slightly damp. Of course it is. You sink down anyway, joints clicking, and fold your hands. A priest steps forward, robes swishing breath, already carrying hints of garlic and zeal. He clears his throat and launches into Latin, beginning the daily prayer ritual. You nod solemnly, mouthing along just enough to seem devout without actually trying too hard. Behind you, a few courtiers shuffle in late, their footsteps muffled by the rushes scattered on the floor. One stifles a sneeze. Another swears under his breath, ironically, because he forgot to remove his hat. The priest glares. You suppress a smirk. Prayers are long. There's scripture chanting, kneeling more chanting, and then something about the eternal flames of damnation which really hits differently before 9 a.m. You glance at a tapestry of St. Michael stabbing a demon in the spleen and wonder how long you're expected to sit here. 10 more minutes. 20 eternity. You shift slightly, the cushion squishes, possibly a blessing, possibly mould. And yet, this isn't just about piety. No prayer time is also prime political time. A glance here, a whispered name there, it's the medieval version of checking your email and reading the morning gossip column all in one go. You hear murmurs behind you. The Baron of Eastbridge is apparently eyeing your cousin's lands. Again. And someone swears they saw the Duke of Alençon's steward sneaking out of the Queen's garden chamber. Oh, the audacity. Historians still argue whether kings were truly devout or merely performed religion for legitimacy. For you, it's both. The people need to see a holy ruler, God's chosen, even if your mind is mostly on whether your new boots are giving you a rash. As the priest drones on about eternal vigilance and resisting sin, you notice a side door creak open. In slips, your spymaster cloaked in dark blue, face half hidden beneath his hood. He doesn't kneel. He doesn't even blink. He just leans against the wall and stares directly at you. You nod ever so slightly. That's enough. He'll speak later. In private. Probably near a fireplace, possibly with wine. Definitely with bad news. The prayers finally end with a chorus of amen, and you rise. Your knees crack like the drawbridge chains. The priest blesses you with a quick splash of holy water that gets directly in your eye. You blink it away with royal dignity, barely. As you exit, you're intercepted by Lady Rosamond, your second cousin's wife's niece, or something like that. Titles are muddy. She bows deep, but her eyes are sharp. "Your Majesty," she says sweetly, "such a stirring sermon." The part about resisting temptation nearly brought me to tears. You're fairly certain she's flirting, or spying, possibly both. You nod politely and she retreats, leaving behind a faint trail of rose oil and scheming. Back in the corridor, you take a deep breath of well air that's only marginally less stale than the chapel's. The guards fall back into step behind you. The steward reappears at your elbow. Your Grace, the audience chamber is ready. Wonderful. The walk to the chamber is lined with statues of long-dead kings, their stony stares cold and accusing. Most died in battle poisoned, or from mysterious hunting accidents that suspiciously involve jealous brothers. You give one of the statues a sarcastic nod. "Still standing, eh?" you mutter. A guard coughs awkwardly. At the tall wooden doors, your herald clears his throat, straightens his tunic, and prepares to shout your titles. All of them. Again. You sigh. Behold His Majesty, ruler of the Seven Ridges, protector of the faithful, lord of the marches, commander of the... You zone out. Honestly, even you don't remember all the titles. One of them might be made up. You once overheard a child call you King of Turnips, and honestly, that might be the most accurate. The audience chamber is warm mercifully. A roaring fire crackles in the hearth and the ceiling disappears into shadows high above. Stone columns line the walls and your throne, heavy carved and completely ergonomically incorrect, sites on a raised platform. You mount the steps and settle in, trying to find a position that doesn't dislocate your spine. The courtiers file in. Petitioners line up. Nobles murmur. The chamber fills with the scent of damp cloaks, old velvet, and ambition. You roll your shoulders and stretch your fingers. Here it comes, the day's first parade of problems. Let the ruling begin. You sit on the throne, if you can call it sitting. It's less a seat and more a wooden statement of power with a back so straight it's probably used to punish slouchers. Your knees stick out uncomfortably, the cushion beneath you is barely thicker than your boot soles, and every time you shift it sounds like the whole platform is groaning in disapproval. Before you, the audience chamber stretches out like a theatre you forgot you're starring in. Courtiers linger in alcoves, whispering behind hands. Nobles lean against pillars with that practiced air of feigned disinterest. Pages scurry, guards watch. And in the centre, forming a slow-moving line that snakes past the carved lion statues, are your beloved subjects' petitioners. Dozens of them. The steward clears his throat. First to speak, Bertram the swineherd. Ah yes, nothing says high nobility like morning complaints about pigs. Bertram steps forward, bowing so deeply you fear he might pop a vertebra. His hat is clutched in trembling hands. He smells like mud sweat and something vaguely porcine. Your Grace, he begins, my neighbour's sow wandered onto my land, and now she's claiming the piglets are hers, even though my boar's the father and I. You hold up a hand. Is the sow branded? Yes, sire, but she says the brand was faded. You hold up your hand again. Settle it with the reeve. The man stammers thanks and bows again, retreating backward like he's in the presence of a dragon rather than a king with indigestion. The next petitioner is a woman clutching a goose. The priest says she cursed the font, the steward whispers. You squint. Cursed the what? The baptismal font, sire. You sigh. The woman's story spills out in a flood of anxious words. Her goose laid an egg during Mass. The priest called it an omen. She insists it was just coincidence. Now the villagers won't let her draw water from the well. Let her use the well, you say, and tell the priest not all eggs are divine messages. Historians still argue whether kings truly heard every petty grievance or delegated most of it to local magistrates. But public hearings were real and symbolic. The king was meant to be accessible, present, a listening god among mortal, even if half the time you were mentally counting how many buttons were on your tunic. The third petitioner is more serious, a knight armour, polished eyes sharp. My liege, I report from the northern border. Bandits are raiding again, mounted fast, striking before dawn. You lean forward. Now this matters. How many men, you ask? 20 to 30, well coordinated. We believe they're being funded, perhaps, by the Earl of Marlow. Of course, that weasel. You nod slowly. Increase the watch. I want a full report by week's end and have the Earl summoned, under pretense of wine and poetry. The knight bows, armour clanking. After that, it's back to more colourful complaints, a baker accusing a rival of poisoning flour, a merchant angry that his cart was seized by toll guards, and an old man who swears the royal astrologer has been stealing his chickens under the guise of celestial omens. Each time you nod, you judge, you decree. Your voice becomes an instrument, low, calm, decisive. Even when inside you're thinking mostly about whether anyone will notice if you sneak a nap. And throughout it all, your scribe sits beside you, scratching away at parchment with a goose feather quill. Ink blots mark every decision. Your word becomes law with every stroke, though you suspect the scribe adds a flourish or two when you're not looking. He once wrote you referred to a fish dispute as a matter of great national importance. You're pretty sure you just said, tell them to fish elsewhere. Then there's the matter of the royal seal. A clerk arrives bearing scrolls, decrees, messages, pardons. Each must be sealed with wax, and you'll ring an enormous gold monstrosity that leaves your hand smelling like brass for hours. You heat the wax, press the ring. Hope you don't smear anything. One mispress and you've pardoned a traitor instead of executing him. That happened once. To your uncle. Awkward dinner afterward. Your Majesty, the clerk says, lowering his voice, this one is a land grant. For Lady Brightham. Are you certain? You pause. Lady Brightham is, well, politically complicated. Her cousin's married to your former rival. Granting her land could be seen as reconciliation or submission. You tilt your head, add 2 cows and a stipulation for military support. You press the seal firmly. The wax hisses. Done. And yes, sometimes documents go missing. Sometimes people forge your seal. Last year, a forgery caused 3 barons to raise armies, all because someone wrote, "His Majesty decrees every man shall own 3 sheep and a duck." You crack your knuckles. The crowd is thinning. The hall is quieter now, filled with only the soft shuffle of retreating boots and the dying echoes of complaints. You exhale. But you don't rise. Because next comes your favourite part of the day, sword training. Just kidding, you hate it. You rise from the throne like a man approaching the gallows, trying not to show the sigh building in your chest. Sword training awaits. The only thing worse than doing it is being seen skipping it. Down the side stairs you go, trailed by your ever-faithful entourage. 2 guards, 1 page, and a nobleman who's always nearby but never actually says anything. You're still not entirely sure what his job is. Possibly ear polisher or ceremonial nodder. Outside the courtyard is already bustling. Squires clang, practice swords, knights bark instructions, and somewhere off to the side, a falcon shrieks in protest about being up this early. The air smells of morning dew, hot leather, and old sweat, a royal fragrance if there ever was one. Your personal arms-master, Sir Godric, approaches. He's twice your age and somehow twice as fit. His beard is greying, but his eyes still glint like forged steel. "Your Majesty," he says with a bow, "are we going light drills today? Or full sparring?" You smile weakly. "Let's start with light, then pretend we sparred." He doesn't smile back. Instead, you're handed a wooden training sword that's about as balanced as a table leg. You swing it once to test the weight and immediately regret doing so. Your shoulder pops. No one reacts, but you're pretty sure one of the squires winced for you. "Your stance is too stiff," Godric mutters. "Bend your knees, relax your shoulders, and try not to aim for your own foot this time." Helpful advice. He lunges first. His blade taps your ribs. Dead, you grunt. Again. This time you manage to parry. He nods in approval and attacks again. You block twist and immediately overbalance, nearly tripping on your own robe. A chuckle echoes from the sidelines. A younger knight, Sir Oswin, smug as a peacock, says something under his breath. You catch only the words "royal ballerina." You make a mental note to assign him to latrine duty. The training continues. You sweat, swing, stumble. Your boots grip poorly on the wet stones and the padded jerkin beneath your tunic feels like a furnace. Still, you press on, if only to maintain appearances. A king must be seen as strong, even if his sword feels like it weighs more than his crown. Historians still argue whether medieval kings truly participated in daily combat drills or simply posed for political effect. You're doing a little of both, swinging just enough to keep your knights loyal, but not so hard you pull something that requires leeching. After a dozen rounds, you pant like a bellows. Godric, not even winded, claps your shoulder. Much improved, sire. Only died 6 times today. Progress. You stagger toward the water barrel and splash your face. Cold relief. You glance at the distant archery range where a few ladies of the court are firing longbows with alarming precision. One of them, Lady Cecily, nods in your direction and lets an arrow fly. Bullseye. You nod back and step casually behind a pillar. Nearby, a hawking master adjusts a falcon's hood. The bird twists its head and lets out a cry that sounds eerily like laughter. You swear it's mocking you. You begin to remove your training gloves, which are soaked through. A page rushes forward with a towel and a fresh tunic. "Shall I help you change, Your Majesty?" the boy asks, wide-eyed and hopeful. You sigh. "Only if you can remove chainmail with a gentle whisper." Godric leans in once more. "You'll join the melee tournament next month, yes." You blink, define join. He grins, not die within the first minute. You give a non-committal shrug. If you say yes, your knights will cheer and brag. If you say no, rumours of weakness will spread like fleas at a banquet. You settle on "we'll see." A trumpet sounds from the ramparts. The steward appears again, holding that infernal scroll. "Your Majesty, the midday meal is being prepared, and the Duke of Langford has arrived. He requests an audience during lunch." Perfect. Because nothing goes with roast peacock quite like subtle threats disguised as compliments. As you make your way back toward the keep, sweaty and sore, your sword arm dangles a little more limply than you'd prefer. But you walk upright. The knights are watching. One nods, another bows. Even Oswin looks grudgingly impressed. You may have been defeated 6 times this morning, but perception, you're winning. You pause at the stairs, look back at the courtyard. The falcon still watches you. You're fairly certain it winked. You return to the castle just as the bell in the west tower tolls noon 12 deep, echoing chimes that roll across the stone like distant thunder. Somewhere a monk is already writing it down in a very serious-looking ledger. But you're just thinking about food. Again. The midday meal, technically called dinner in these parts, is about to begin. And by meal, we mean several courses of questionably cooked meat vegetables that haven't seen boiling water in years, and conversations so delicately laced with insults you could embroider it on a royal pillow. You enter the dining chamber through a tall archway. The sunlight streams in through arched windows, catching the dust in golden beams that make everything look vaguely holy. Don't be fooled. This is not a place of peace. It's a battleground with napkins. The long table is already set. Pewter goblets glint beside thick wooden plates. Knives are sharpened napkins folded triangular. Of course, everyone's pretending they know which fork to use, and seating is very deliberately arranged. Allies to your right almost, friends to your left. And the Duke of Langford dead centre directly across from you. You sigh. Langford stands as you enter and bows just enough to suggest he's still taller than you. He's wearing deep green velvet trimmed in fox fur and has a face that looks like it's permanently smelling something unpleasant. Probably the eel pie. "Your Majesty," he says, lips tight. Duke Langford, you reply with an equally tight nod. "May your appetite be as sharp as your tongue." He smiles, and yours as healthy as your lineage. Touché. Historians still argue whether nobles truly engaged in these verbal duels, or whether it's modern mythologizing. But based on Langford's expression, you're betting it's absolutely true. You take your seat. Servants sweep in like a choreographed ballet, only noisier and with more gravy. The first course arrives pottage, a thick, vaguely green stew that smells of cabbage garlic and possibly defeat. You dip your spoon. It jiggles ominously. To your left, Lady Margaret coughs discreetly and dabs her lips. She leans in slightly. "Sire, I hear the Bishop of Carrow has been asking questions about succession." Her eyes don't meet yours, but her message is clear. People are talking again. About heirs, about the Queen's situation. You nod once, not breaking eye contact with your spoon. Course 2 roasted capon, heavily salted, probably to disguise the fact that it was still squawking this morning. You carve slowly, deliberately. Langford is watching. He's not here just to dine. He's here to see how steady your hands are, whether your appetite is hearty, whether your eyes droop. All signs of health or decline. You smile mid-bite and intentionally drop a bone into your lap. 2 servants rush over to retrieve it before it touches the floor. A subtle reminder, you're still the king. Even your crumbs are treated like relics. A lute player begins a soft tune near the fire. The melody is pleasant, but the lyrics are tragically earnest. Something about a swan that longs to become a man. You try not to laugh. Course 3 arrives a baked eel coiled into a spiral like a sleeping dragon. The eyes are still intact. You stab it without hesitation. Langford raises an eyebrow. You raise 2. Between bites, more murmured updates reach your ears. The taxes in the northern shires are overdue. The grain stores have weevils again. The Countess of Bristol claims she saw a comet and wants to build a shrine. You nod grunt and once say, with the vague authority of a man who understands celestial omens. You don't. You sip from your goblet, wine this time red strong imported from somewhere that sounds expensive. A servant offers more. You allow it. Appear weak and Langford will pounce. Appear too strong and you'll end up fencing him in the garden later. Course 4 is something bold roasted swan with oranges. Exotic, expensive, more symbolic than flavourful. You pretend to enjoy it. The skin is leathery, the meat stringy and the oranges surprisingly bitter. Did Your Majesty enjoy the performance this morning? Langford asks suddenly. You blink. Performance. The swordplay, he says smoothly. Your footwork was enthusiastic. You smile, and yet I remain uninjured, which is more than I can say for my opponents. He chuckles. It's the kind of laugh people do when they want to insult you, but also live to see dessert. Course 5 is a custard shaped like a crown, subtle. Someone's trying hard to be noticed. Finally, the meal winds down. You've eaten more than a monastery during Lent and endured more veiled threats than a poet in exile. Your belt feels tighter, your patience looser. As you rise from the table, the nobles do the same. Langford bows again, this time deeper. You nod back, but your eyes are on his fingers. One of his rings glints too brightly. You recognize it, a seal that belonged to a baron whose lands recently changed hands. Interesting. You say nothing. Yet. As you leave the hall, your steward catches up breathless. Your Majesty the Queen wishes to speak with you, privately. Of course she does. Because in a medieval castle, the midday meal is never really over, it just moves to a different battlefield. You follow the steward down a narrower corridor now, where tapestries muffle your footsteps and the scent of beeswax and rose petals replaces the smoky tang of roasted meats. This is the Queen's wing, quieter, neater, and somehow always slightly colder despite the thick velvet curtains. The Queen has a way of summoning you that doesn't feel like a summons. It's a request, technically, but it carries the gravity of a papal edict wrapped in lace and perfumed wax. You steel yourself before entering. The chamber doors open without creak. She has her own carpenters, of course, and you're greeted by soft lute music and the rhythmic whisper of a needle pulling through cloth. There she sits back straight, posture flawless, embroidering something intricate and floral. Or is that a dagger pattern? You're not quite sure. She doesn't look up. My lord, she says, not missing a stitch. Your Grace, you reply, using the formality she prefers when her ladies-in-waiting are nearby. They are always nearby. She gestures to the seat opposite her. You sit. It's not the throne, not even the cushioned bench in your council chamber, just a carved oak chair with too much back and too little give. For a moment only the sound of her embroidery fills the room. Silk thread slides through linen. Then I hear the Duke of Langford is pressing again. You nod. He watched me eat an eel with unsettling intensity. She allows a faint smile, and yet still no air. There it is, the subject that dances in every corner of court and haunts every dinner toast. The lack of an heir, a royal nursery still empty, a cradle that's never rocked, and a marriage that has grown more strategic than tender. She continues stitching. Do you remember Lady Aveline? She's returned from Bruges. Remarkably fertile family hers. You raise an eyebrow. Are you suggesting I take a concubine? She pauses. I'm suggesting we stop pretending the problem will resolve itself with prayers and oranges. Historians still debate the intimacy or lack thereof in royal marriages. Were kings and queens affectionate partners, or were they glorified roommates with elaborate birth expectations? In your case, it's complicated. You change the subject. The Bishop of Carrow is sniffing around the succession again. Her lips tighten. He wants a puppet on the throne, possibly one he helped swaddle. You both know the Church's influence grows heavier with every year you fail to produce a son. Daughters, they whisper, are blessings but not successors. Not here. Not yet. Have you spoken with your brother? She asks. You nod. He's offered support, for now. She sighs, setting down the embroidery hoop. Support is temporary, blood is permanent, and this castle leaks whispers like a sieve. You lean back slightly. The fire crackles in the hearth, casting shadows that lick the edges of her expression. For a brief moment, she looks tired. Not angry, not calculating, just tired. Of politics, of performance, of pretending that everything is exactly as it should be. You don't mention it. Instead, you rise. I'll speak to the council, quietly. She nods once, and perhaps visit the astrologer. A more favourable alignment couldn't hurt. You smirk. Or more fennel in the diet. Now she smiles genuinely for a moment, or fewer banquets. You exit the chamber, the door closing gently behind you. Outside, your steward is waiting, ever present, as though he simply appeared when needed. The treasury clerk awaits, sire. But first, your cousin was seen speaking with the ambassador from Aquitaine, alone. Of course she was. You wave him off. Tell the treasury I'll come after council. You head instead to your private study, a place where secrets are whispered louder than sermons. It's time for some preemptive manoeuvring. Because when the Queen brings up heirs and alliances in the same breath, something's brewing. And it's probably not just another embroidery pattern. As you walk, you run a finger along the cold stone wall, passing a tapestry of your great-grandfather hunting wolves. You always thought it odd the way the wolf looked less like a beast and more like a man on all fours snarling in defense. You've come to appreciate that ambiguity. Sometimes it's hard to tell who's the predator and who's the prey. You reach your study, the one room in the castle where the fire always seems to be just the right temperature, and the air doesn't smell like boiled mutton. It's dim, but not dark. Sunlight slants in through a narrow window, falling across shelves of scrolls, ink pots, and a collection of carved wooden owls someone once gave you as a diplomatic gift. You don't remember who. Probably a minor lord trying to secure trade rights. You kept the owls, forgot the lord. A steward enters bowing slightly, followed by your cupbearer, and a pair of young pages carrying today's midday records. But it's the arrival of your cook that makes your nose twitch. It's time. You sit down at a long oak table and with a nod summon the meal. Midday feasts are never simple. The nobles may have left your formal table, but the real gluttony that begins here, in private, where no one's judging how many helpings of pie you take. Well, no one except your waistline. The first course is set before you on a silver dish, boiled parsnips in vinegar and honey. The smell alone could strip paint, but you're told it's good for the liver. You eye it warily. The cook watches hopeful. You take one bite, it crunches like regret. Next, the servants bring out the centerpiece, a massive platter with no fewer than 12 dishes. There's roasted pheasant with plums, buttery turnips, a whole trout stuffed with herbs, and wait, is that gooseberry jam? You're not sure if it's bold or a crime. You shrug and try it anyway. Then come the eels. Again. This time baked into a pie, their tails poking out of the crust like accusing fingers. You make eye contact with your scribe across the table. He pretends not to see. Historians still debate how many courses a medieval king would consume on an average day. Some suggest a dozen, others claim kings ate less than expected due to poor health or cautious physicians. You're eating more out of duty than desire. Every bite is a message, every plate a performance. And just when you think the table is full, a page announces, "Peacock, Your Majesty." Of course, the royal show-off dish. The peacock arrives, resplendent feathers, reattached beak gilded. It looks more ready for coronation than consumption. You nod politely, then dig in with the subtlety of a man who's really just here for the gravy. Between bites, your steward reads aloud reports, grain shortages in the eastern provinces, repairs needed on the western ramparts, and an unusually large purchase of saffron that no one will claim responsibility for. Suspicious. Oh, and a farmer from Harrow insists he's bred a two-headed goat, the steward adds dryly. You pause mid-chew, reward him, or fine him, whichever makes him go away faster. As the meal stretches on, your personal physician enters. He doesn't speak at first, just stands nearby, arms folded, scanning your plate like a hawk inspecting a field mouse. Still too much red meat, he finally mutters. You point to the turnips. Balance. He sighs. Your Majesty, your humours. Yes. Melancholy collar, black bile, yellow something? I'll balance it tomorrow. He doesn't look convinced. The final dish arrives, a subtlety. That's the name, not the flavour. A sugar sculpture shaped like a castle under siege, complete with almond paste soldiers. It's delicate, impressive. You pluck a tower and pop it into your mouth. As you chew, your steward clears his throat again. The Duke of Garrison sends word. He'll arrive 3 days hence, accompanied by his daughter. You raise an eyebrow. Which daughter? The unmarried one. So it begins. Again. Marriage proposals hidden under layers of politeness and roast duck. You make a mental note to have the guest rooms inspected for bedbugs. The last noble daughter left behind more than a silk ribbon. You lean back at last, groaning ever so slightly. The meal is over. Your appetite long gone, your belt fighting for its life. You wipe your mouth with an embroidered cloth depicting a lion battling a serpent. Symbolic. You're not sure who you are in the image. As the table is cleared, you stand and stretch joints crackling like dry parchment. From the hallway, you hear a commotion, laughter, barking, and a sharp voice shouting, "Not the pheasant again!" You step into the corridor just as your royal hunting dogs tumble around the corner tails, wagging tongues, lolling. One of them, a massive mastiff named Thorn, runs directly into your leg, nearly toppling you. His handler arrives seconds later, breathless and mortified. "Sire, he escaped the kennel." You pat the dog absent-mindedly. Thorn slobbers happily on your boots. "He's got better instincts than some of my guards," you mutter. The handler bows, red-faced, and drags the beast away. You watch them go, then glance at your steward. "Cancel sword training tomorrow." "But sire, I've just wrestled a peacock-faced eel pie and outlasted the Queen's politics. Let me have this." He sighs, marking something off your schedule. You head for the next task, already anticipating what fresh absurdity awaits. You've barely rounded the next corridor when you hear them, before you see them, two noblemen arguing in hushed but furious tones. The kind of voices that mean business low enough to avoid a tension sharp enough to cut through stone. You don't recognize the words at first, but the body language is unmistakable. Tight jaws, white knuckles, and one of them has a finger pointed dangerously close to the other's chest. "It's Duke Alric and Count Theobald. Of course it is." Your steward grimaces. "They've been waiting in the solar, sire. Said it was urgent." "It always is." You step into the solar, a sunlit chamber with stained glass windows and a pair of throne-like chairs that no one ever uses because they're too stiff for any spine born of mortal flesh. The two men break apart at once, each turning toward you with a face already set in theatrical neutrality. "Your Majesty Alric," begins, voice dripping in deference, "we come to you in trust, for only your wisdom can resolve this minor issue." "Minor, that's how you know it's not." You motion for them to speak. No chairs this time. This isn't a conversation, it's a performance. "We have a disagreement," Theobald says, "regarding the river boundary near Elmswick." "Your maps are outdated," Alric snaps. "And your shepherds are stealing our sheep." "Your sheep walk like they're drunk. They crossed into my lands of their own. Poor judgment." You blink. Theobald turns to you. "My liege, these trespasses cannot continue. It undermines the authority of the crown when nobles defy agreed borders." Alric scoffs. He says that while his men fortify the riverbank. You raise a hand. Silence falls, but only just. "You know this river dispute. It's the same one that flares up every few years. Sometimes it's sheep, sometimes it's fishing nets. Once it was over who owned a particularly fertile goose." Historians still argue whether such squabbles between nobles were orchestrated for political advantage, or truly as petty as they sound. You're convinced it's both. A power game dressed in peasant problems. You gesture to your steward, who unrolls the royal map onto the nearest table. It's beautiful, and also wildly inaccurate. The river in question is a lazy blue squiggle placed between illustrations of forest trolls and a stag the size of a tower. You frown. Have either of you actually been to this river? Both nobles glance at each other. "I sent men," Theobald mumbles. "I received reports," says Alric. You sigh. Send a neutral surveyor, mark the current, redraw the agreement. Theobald starts to protest. "But..." You cut him off with a look. "Or I could declare the land royal property and tax you both for grazing rights." That shuts them up. They exchange curt nods and storm out in opposite directions. You wait until they're gone before muttering, "Honestly, sheep." You turn back to the steward. He hesitates. The Queen's cousin wishes to discuss her dowry. You groan. Of course she does. But before you can move, the door opens again, this time to admit a small, bent man with ink-stained fingers and a stack of parchment nearly taller than he is. It's your royal archivist, Master Brant. He bows so deeply his spectacles nearly fall off. Sire, forgive the interruption, but we've discovered a discrepancy in the records from Lord Hemwick's estate. It seems his family may have falsely claimed rights to. You hold up a hand. Brant, do you remember the eel pie? He blinks. No, your majesty. Then we'll talk later. He bows and shuffles out scrolls, wobbling dangerously. You make a note to give him a slightly shorter hat next Christmas. Maybe something padded. As you exit the solar, another noble passes by and bows, murmuring something about the rumours from the southern coast. You don't stop. If you stopped for every rumour, you'd still be back at breakfast hearing about talking owls and mermaid sightings. In the hallway, you spot the court painter crouched in a corner, peeking around a tapestry and sketching furiously. You pause. What are you doing? He jumps, capturing your majesty's stride. The power in your heel strikes so symbolic. You keep walking. Make sure my left side looks nobler. He nods enthusiastically and continues scribbling. You re-enter the main hall just as a guard informs you that Baroness Elira is waiting in the garden chamber. She brought preserves, the guard adds. Preserves. That's never just jam, that's a bribe in a jar. You wave it off for now. Too many moving pieces. Too many nobles trying to leverage sheep daughters and gooseberries into land grants and favours. You climb the stone steps slowly, your hand grazing the cool iron railing, and pause near the stained glass window of St. Justine. She's holding a sword and a scroll. You've always liked her. For a moment you let yourself breathe. The disputes are settled for now, but peace in your world is just the quiet between interruptions. There's a particular sound that carries differently through a castle courtyard, the clatter of hooves, the bark of hounds, the distant roar of an impatient hunting horn. You recognise it immediately, even before your steward catches up, red-faced and breathless. The hunt. Your Majesty, he pants. Your horse is being saddled. The hawks are ready. And Lord Davy is already sharpening his spear in public view again. Of course he is. Hunting isn't just tradition, it's spectacle. Proof you're still a warrior even if your muscles groan like wagon wheels and your knees feel like they've made a pact with the devil. You resist the urge to fake an injury, not because of pride, but because your physician might actually recommend leeches again. You descend into the outer court where a stable boy is brushing your horse's flanks with a curry comb and more optimism than accuracy. Your mount, a massive beast named Valor, who is only loyal when food is involved, stomps one ironclad hoof and flicks his tail at a nearby page who ducks expertly. Clearly this isn't his first rodeo, or royal rodeo. The saddle is ornate leather tooled with your crest and you know it's going to chafe. But vanity must suffer. You swing up awkwardly, aided by two men and a quick prayer. The hunting party assembles nobles in fitted leather. A few knights, several squires, and that one guy who always brings a bugle and blows it too much. Lord Davin rides at your side, grinning like a fox that just found the hen house. Sire, he says, today we flush out a boar the size of a pony. You glance at him. Did it sign a witness statement? He laughs far too loud. The falconers release the hawks' first gliding silhouettes that rise above the trees and scan the earth below. They're majestic, terrifying, and smell faintly of blood and damp feathers. You love them. Historians still debate whether medieval kings hunted for food fun or sheer political dominance. Truth is, it's all three. A king who can bring down a charging boar is a king who can bring down a rebellious duke. It's not subtle. That's the point. The forest looms ahead, ancient dense, and filled with the earthy perfume of moss bark and centuries of unspoken secrets. Sunlight filters through the trees in speckled gold patches. Birds sing somewhere off to the left. Your guards say it's peaceful. That's because they're not the ones being hunted by a 500-pound ball of tusks and rage. The hounds are loosed. They race ahead in a blur of fur and excitement, barking with frenzied joy. Somewhere in the distance, a horn sounds. Once, then twice. The boar has been spotted. And suddenly it's chaos. Branches whip past your face as you charge into the woods. Valor snorts muscles rippling beneath you. Lord Davin whoops like a child with a slingshot. One of the younger knights nearly falls off his horse. You duck just in time to avoid a low-hanging limb that absolutely would have knocked the crown out of your skull. Then you see it. The boar, massive, snorting, eyes red and intelligent in the worst possible way. It barrels through the undergrowth, leaving broken twigs and flattened grass in its wake. You spur Valor forward, javelin in hand. Your squire yells something probably about caution, but it's drowned out by the thunder of hooves and the wild barking of the hounds. The world narrows, just you, the beast, and your aim. You throw. The javelin arcs through the air like a divine judgment and misses by 3 feet. Fortunately, Sir Gerard is behind you. His spear strikes true and the boar goes down in a violent tangle of limbs dust and very offended squeals. You pull up your horse chest, heaving not from exertion but from sheer second-hand panic. Gerard dismounts, sword drawn, and delivers the final blow. Blood sprays. The forest goes quiet again. The hounds circle, panting happily. You ride up, nodding to Gerard. Well struck, you say, then add, I softened it first. He grins, of course, sire. You dismount for the ceremonial part, the offering of the kill. A dagger is handed to you, engraved and purely ceremonial. You kneel beside the fallen boar and offer a silent thanks to nature, to victory, to not having been gored. Your physician will later say you risked too much. Your counsel will say it was a noble act of kingly strength. You will say nothing and enjoy the hot bath waiting for you back at the castle. The hunt returns in procession. The boar is tied to a sled dragged behind 2 horses bleeding slowly into the trail. Horns sound again, mostly for effect. Lord Davin retells the tale before it's even done happening. In his version, you both took the beast on together while reciting the lineage of your house. You don't correct him. Back at the gates, the crowd has gathered. Townsfolk cheer. Some bow. Children point. You raise a blood-stained gauntlet and wave like a man who didn't nearly fall off his horse 3 separate times. The Queen watches from the upper gallery. She says nothing. But you notice her embroidery hoop now holds an image of a very large boar, with your crest above it. The hunt ends, but the real game begins once you're off the horse and back within the castle's thick stone walls. No sooner have your boots touched down in the courtyard than a familiar voice calls out light as a feather sharp as a dagger wrapped in silk. Majesty. You turn. It's the Queen. She's not alone, of course. 2 ladies in waiting hover behind her like ornamental shadows. One is fanning herself, though the day isn't warm. The other is pretending not to listen while listening intently. The Queen steps forward, skirts whispering across the stones. She's changed again. Now draped in sapphire silk, embroidered with gold thread in what you realise only too late are foxes circling a crown, subtle. I trust the hunt was thrilling, she asks, glancing down at your blood-smeared tunic. Boars are such honest creatures, no hidden motives. You offer her a tired smile. It was refreshing, nothing like a beast charging at you with two blades for a face to clarify your priorities. She tilts her head. Speaking of sharp things, we should talk. You nod, of course. You follow her into the Queen's solarium, a room filled with light, low benches and the faint smell of lavender and secrets. This isn't her formal chamber. It's her informal, strategic space. The place where nobles let their guard down and where your spine has learned to remain absolutely upright. She gestures for you to sit. You do. She remains standing. I've received word, she says, that your sister has invited the envoy from Aragon, privately, for supper. You blink. Supper. Just him and a roasted goose. You exhale slowly. That's how it starts. 1 goose, 2 candlesticks, and suddenly someone's cousin is betrothed to a foreign duke and your council is panicking. I'll speak with her, you say. You'll need to do more than that. She finally sits. You'll need to remind this court that marriages happen with royal permission. Or royal suggestion, you counter. She smiles. Precisely. Historians still argue how much power queens wielded behind the scenes. Officially, little. Realistically enough to change alliances with a single glance across a dinner table. You look toward the window. Below in the courtyard, Lord Daven is miming the boar's charge to a small group of squires. His audience looks both impressed and mildly concerned. The Queen follows your gaze. Men enjoy stories of the hunt, but they rarely notice the fox sneaking past the hounds. You return your eyes to her. Is that what this is? Not yet, but it could be. She stands and walks to a small writing desk where a parchment lays half-covered. You notice the seal, red wax, the mark of her brother, the Duke of Lyon. She follows your gaze again too quickly. What does he want, you ask? She folds the parchment shut with a casual flick. To send his son, for experience at court. Experience in what precisely? In how to smile without drawing blood. You exhale. This is how it goes. Every visit, every guest, every family member with a suspiciously well-dressed retinue. Everyone wants a piece of the crown, even if it's just the cushion it sits on. She looks at you then not as queen to king, not even wife to husband, but as the only other person in the castle who knows what it's like to hold power and feel it slipping like sand through calloused fingers. Watch the ambassador from Aragon, she says. Watch your sister. And watch your cousin, he's been too quiet lately. You rise, giving a slow nod. I'll summon the council tonight. She smirks faintly. Midnight strategy, your favourite. Only when there's wine. There will be. She pauses, red, like the seal. As you leave the solarium, the air feels just a little colder. You pass through the long corridor where torches flicker and tapestries billow ever so slightly from the autumn breeze slipping through hidden cracks. A voice murmurs from behind one of the hanging drapes. You catch only fragments. If the Duke's son arrives, the Queen's playing deeper than we thought. You keep walking. Let them whisper. Let them plot. You've learned that ruling isn't about crushing every scheme. It's about knowing when to let them bloom just long enough to pluck. You descend the spiral steps behind the library, the ones most courtiers avoid, believing they lead to old storage rooms or forgotten wine cellars. In truth, they lead to something far more useful, the chamber where real power whispers. A torch sputters in its iron bracket as you reach the bottom. The stone corridor hums with silence, and the air changes cooler, denser, carrying a scent of wax parchment and secrets best left unspoken. You push open the thick wooden door. It doesn't creak. It never has. Oiled weakly like all good secrets. Inside the chamber glows with low candlelight. It's smaller than the council hall, but more important. There's a long, narrow table, a map stretched across it, weighed down by carved ivory markers. Each piece represents a fief, a fortress, a fleet, each one a possible war. 3 men wait inside. Your spy master stands near the fireplace, hands clasped, face unreadable beneath a hood so deep it might as well be a confession booth. Across the table, your chancellor leafs through a scroll murmuring about coin and tariffs and whether you really need to fund the bridge in Arnhem when so few people fall off the old one. And at the end of the table, the only one seated Lady Elizabeth, your quietest advisor, dressed in mourning black since, well, always. They rise as you enter, you wave them down. No formalities here. Speak, you say. The spy master steps forward, 2 messages intercepted, both encoded, one in Langford's cipher, the other, he pauses. The seal is foreign. You raise an eyebrow. Aragon. Of course! Have we broken it? Working on it, he says, but the Aragonese envoy met with your cousin yesterday, alone, in the old armory. Your cousin, again. That man has more side meetings than a travelling monk with a guilt complex. Lady Elizabeth slides a parchment toward you. Langford's forces are massing, she says softly, quietly. His excuse is increased banditry. That's the 3rd noble this month blaming invisible bandits, you mutter. Historians will call them economic fluctuations, the Chancellor adds dryly. You glance at the map. Langford's lands border 3 others. He's testing something, either your patience or your ability to call a bluff. Deploy scouts, you say. No banners, just eyes. And your cousin the spy master asks. You think for a moment, invite him to dinner. Just him. And a taster. They nod. Then comes the other matter. Elizabeth unfolds another parchment. It's blank, but she tilts it toward the fire and faint letters shimmer into view. Inky and vinegar, classic. You read silently. A message from the Duke of Lyon, the Queen's brother. He's requesting permission to send his son, yes, but not just for court experience. He wants lands, title, influence. He wants a betrothal. To your sister. Your stomach knots. You already know your sister won't approve. She has a fondness for poetry hawking and absolutely no interest in politics, or apparently men who use their father's name as a door opener. But declining this request means pushing the Queen's family away. Approving it means placing a lion inside your bloodline's gates. You pass the message back. No reply. Not yet. Elizabeth nods. Delay often speaks louder than denial. The Chancellor rolls up a scroll and sighs. Meanwhile, grain prices are rising, peasants are hoarding salt, and a baker punched a bishop over meat pies. You blink. Come again. It's being handled, he says, waving it off. The spy master steps forward again, and the astrologer has concerns. You stare at him. Since when do we report celestial concerns in a war room? Since he began telling people there's a star aligning with the serpent's mouth, and that it predicts royal betrayal. You rub your temples. Let's not base strategy on bedtime stories. They're not your bedtime stories, Elizabeth says quietly. They're the people's. And there it is. Ruling isn't just about roads and taxes. It's about controlling the narrative. You don't just wear the crown, you script the legend. You nod slowly. Tell the astrologer to be more optimistic. Or I'll align his stars with the floorboards. They chuckle just enough to break the tension. Then the door creaks open. A page appears nervous. Your Majesty, the Queen requests your presence. She says it's urgent. You exhale, again. You rise. Keep watching Langford. I want to know what colour his horse sneezed this morning. They nod. You leave the chamber the way you came, in silence through candlelight, and Stone feeling the weight of a dozen invisible threads pulling in different directions. Outside, the air is colder. The sky has darkened. Another day slipping into dusk. And you haven't even had your bath yet. You take the long corridor back toward the royal chambers, the one with the narrow stained glass windows and the mosaic floor worn smooth by generations of boots heavier than your own. The sky beyond has turned that soft violet grey that only appears before evening storms, quiet, brooding, the kind of sky that makes torches look warmer than they are. But instead of turning toward your own wing, you head to the Queen's quarters once again. 2 visits in one day. That's either an omen or a trap. You find her in her private reading room this time. The chamber is low lit and smells of parchment and cinnamon bark. A fire crackles in the hearth and 3 candles flicker in uneven rhythm on the table beside her. She looks up from a letter. You're early, she says, or I'm late. Neither you say stepping inside. Apparently time waits for no king. She sets the letter down. The seal is already broken, her brother's again. Of course. He's pressing, she says, before you even ask. For land. For a promise. You sit to wed his son to my sister. She nods slowly, watching your face. And what do you think, you ask? She taps her finger against the armrest. I think my brother sees a future where his blood sits on your throne. But I also think he forgets that my blood is already there. The silence stretches. You always did have a poetic way of threatening people, you murmur. She leans forward slightly. I'm not threatening. I'm reminding. The hearth pops. A log splits gently, sending a flurry of sparks up the chimney. You study her for a moment. It's not love, not exactly. It's something stranger. Respect, familiarity. Shared ambition that's soured and sweetened by time. You've outlived tenderness, but not loyalty. And sometimes in court, that's rarer than romance. I'm delaying the proposal, you say. She nods, wise, for now. You rise, but before you leave, she adds, I had another message from Lyon. Another. She gestures toward the letter. He wants to send a gift with his son, a cart of rare spices. You laugh softly, to bribe my nose into agreeing to the match. Perhaps just to remind you of his reach. You pause in the doorway, tell him spices are welcome. Sons will consider. You step back into the corridor just in time to catch a page rushing toward you, red-faced and winded. Your Majesty, the baths are ready. At last. You nod and follow the boy through a side passage that winds downward toward the warmest room in the castle, that doesn't involve arguments. The royal baths are carved into the stone of the lower wing, fed by hot springs, and smelling faintly of rosemary mint and damp secrets. You've always liked it here. No thrones, no scrolls, no whispered betrayals, just steam warmth, and the occasional reminder that even kings have toes. A pair of servants wait inside. They help you out of your layers, boots, tunic belt, the undertunic, and yes, the second belt that holds the decorative dagger you never use but always wear. You step into the water slowly. It's hot, borderline scalding, but your muscles melt in gratitude. You sink to your shoulders and exhale. For the first time today, you don't feel watched. Except by your advisor. A voice echoes from the other end of the bath chamber, sire. It's Sir Aldrich. Too thin for armour, too smart for his own good, and unfortunately too loyal to stay quiet. You could have waited until I finished soaking, you mutter. He bows. Then the information would be old. Langford's youngest son was seen leaving the monastery last night. He met with a cloaked rider. No crest, no markings. You raise an eyebrow, in secret. Not very, the monks are terrible gossips. You sigh. Get me the list of every noble with a reason to want Langford in debt or dead. Already started, Aldrich replies. He's always 3 steps ahead. That's why you keep him close, and why you sleep with a dagger under your pillow. He disappears again, like mist, like problems waiting at the door. You close your eyes. Historians rarely record the baths. They focus on wars, treaties, coronations. But this half hour of heat and silence is what keeps kings from collapsing. You stay until your fingers wrinkle. Then you emerge warm and weightless like a man freshly baked. The servants hand you linen cloths and fresh clothes, a soft tunic house slippers and blessedly no armour. For once you feel less like a monarch and more like a man. You make your way back to your chamber, body relaxed, mind still coiled. Because dinner is coming. And with it, more guests, more questions, and probably more eel. You return to your chamber wrapped in warmth and the faint scent of rosemary, only to be reminded yet again that the life of a king is never truly yours. The moment your foot crosses the threshold, 2 stewards stand at attention, one already mid-sentence. And the ambassador from Aquitaine has arrived early, sire. Of course he has. You nod, barely stopping your feet, and dinner. Being served in the Winter Hall. Smaller company tonight, just 12. Just 12. That's small in royal terms. Anything less than a tournament is considered intimate. You exchange the comfort of your slippers for formal shoes, so stiff they might as well be made from remorse. Over the new tunic, a deep burgundy velvet, you're draped in a ceremonial sash. It itches. It always itches. The walk to the Winter Hall takes you past a corridor where portraits of your ancestors hang glaring down at you in oil and judgment. You glance at your great-uncle Baldric, the one who lost half the fleet and 2 mistresses in a single year. Even he looks disappointed tonight. The Winter Hall is lower-ceilinged and cosier than the Great Hall, though cosy here means only mildly cavernous. A roaring fire dances in the hearth, its glow flickering over silver goblets, polished pewter plates, and a centerpiece of dried lavender and pine cones that smells like forced celebration. You take your seat at the head of the table. Everyone else follows suit. To your right, the ambassador from Aquitaine, Lord d'Armand. Tall, thin, with a beard so precisely trimmed it likely has its own servant. His French-accented pleasantries float around you like incense, pleasant at first, then oddly suffocating. To your left, your cousin. Yes, that cousin. The one whose smiles are a little too patient and whose compliments always seem to arrive exactly one heartbeat too late. The first course is served onion tartlets, delicately browned and likely to haunt your breath until sunrise. You sip wine red bold, possibly chosen by your steward, to remind everyone here that you still hold the goblet and therefore the blade. D'Armand leans in slightly. Your Majesty, I must compliment your hawking grounds. I saw one of your falcons this morning. Fierce bird. Thank you, you reply. We train them on ambassadors. A few nervous laughs ripple around the table. D'Armand chuckles, though his eyes narrow by half a blink. You sip again. The conversation shifts to trade wool, of course. It always comes back to wool. Your cousin mentions a particularly profitable arrangement his stewards have negotiated with merchants in Calais. D'Armand listens too closely. You file that away. Historians will later debate what was said tonight, what alliances shifted, what gestures sealed or ruined pacts. But in truth, most diplomacy is done between bites, glances across the goblets, phrases that sound bland but burn with meaning. The second course arrives stewed duck with sage and apples, tender, slightly gamey. Your cousin asks if you've considered opening port access in the Southern Bay. You pretend not to hear. Third course, veal with almonds. You ask D'Armand how his king fares. He answers with praise so effusive it borders on treasonous to his own family, which makes you wonder what he actually wants. Fourth course, pears in wine sauce, chilled. A palate cleanser, which would be useful if the court ever had a palate, or a clean moment. As the plates are cleared, the conversation meanders to literature, a safe place to argue, without risking war. Someone quotes a poet, someone else corrects the quote, and before long you're debating whether love is stronger than duty with two barons and a lady who once stabbed her husband with a knitting needle. You nod occasionally, smile faintly, but your eyes stay on D'Armand. And he notices. Because that's how the game is played. Nothing said directly, but everything said just enough. As the last dish is served, figs honeyed and stuffed with herbs, you make your final move. You must be tired from your journey, you say to D'Armand, casually warmly. You'll stay in the northern tower, the one with the view of the stables. His eyes twitch. That tower is farthest from the Queen's wing and conveniently near the guard captain's quarters. He bows graciously. It would be an honor, Majesty. You nod, satisfied. Dinner ends. Guests rise. There are bows, farewells, and murmured blessings that feel like veiled calculations. You return to your chamber, peel off the finery, and sink into a chair by the hearth. For a moment, it's quiet, soft, still. The fire crackles, and your eyelids grow heavy. The dining hall is mostly cleared, the wine flagons emptied, the diplomats escorted, some reluctantly to their assigned towers. You finally make your way toward your private chamber again when a familiar sound calls you back. Laughter, high, shrill, and far too bold. You turn. There he is, bouncing on the balls of his feet in the middle of the receiving hall, your court jester Finnick, dressed in bells, motley, and pure insolence. Sire, he calls, arms flung wide. May I be your dessert? You sigh. I've had enough goose for one evening. The few remaining courtiers chuckle but nervously. Finnick bows, low hat bells jingling. Word has it, Your Majesty slew a boar today, he says, approaching, and still made it to dinner without tusk in your ribs. A new record. You gesture vaguely. Be brief. I'm digesting. Then let me aid your digestion with truths wrapped in jest, or jests that sting like truths, depending on how honest you're feeling tonight. He launches into his routine stories, impersonations, sly rhymes. His version of the hunt involves you mistaking a tree stump for a wild pig and accidentally stabbing your own boot. In his telling, the ambassador from Aquitaine is a pigeon in a wig and Langford is a hedgehog with a very sharp stick. You should be offended. Instead, you laugh. Not loudly, not for show, just enough. Finnick watches your face like a hawk. He knows how far he can push, and you ironically trust him more than most nobles. Do you know why jesters wear bells? He asks softly after the others drift away. You shake your head. So kings know exactly where the truth is hiding. He bows again, deeper this time. You nod once, and he vanishes down the corridor. Historians still debate whether jesters were merely comic relief or secret counselors. You know better. Sometimes it's the fool who speaks the truth while everyone else wears a mask. And tonight your mask is slipping. The laughter fades and so does the heat of the evening fire, replaced now by a quiet chill as you retreat deeper into the castle. Past the great hall, past the chapel's shadowy corner down the eastern wing, where the walls are lined, not with banners but with books. You step into the royal study, but tonight there is no council, no scrolls to sign, no steward breathing down your neck with a list of tax codes. Just you, and a chessboard. Set out already as it often is because you never know who might drop by with strategy on their mind. And tonight that someone is already waiting. Your Majesty, says the envoy from Bohemia, rising from his chair. You blink. You play. He gestures toward the board, well enough to lose in interesting ways. You smile faintly and take the seat opposite him. The pieces are carved from ivory and jet, worn smooth by generations of royal hands. The king piece bears a suspicious resemblance to your grandfather, broad-nosed, sceptical brow. The bishop rumoured to have been modelled after a cardinal your great-aunt once banished for eating during Lent. You open with a conservative move. He mirrors it, polite, predictable. The envoy speaks idly while you play. Your walls are strong, your people loyal, your enemies. He slides a knight forward, uncertain. You counter moving a pawn without looking at him. Is this still chess? He smiles, always. The pieces dance between you. A queen swept too far left, a castle sacrificed too early. He sighs when you trap his bishop. Diplomacy, he says, is often played with fewer rules and more knives. Then you're in the right court, you reply. He bows his head. We would offer alliance. You don't respond immediately. You tap your finger on the edge of the board, watching his rook threaten your flank. What would Bohemia want in return, you ask? He moves his king one square, a retreat. A name for our daughter. You stare at him. The board vanishes. All you see is the implication. A marriage. Historians still argue about the political weight of royal chess games. Some say it was all pretense. Others claim entire wars began with a misplayed pawn. You move your queen. Check you say softly. The envoy nods, then stands even before the game ends. He bows. Sometimes the message is more important than the outcome. You watch him leave the click of his boots echoing against ancient stone. Alone again, you glance down at the board. The Black King lies trapped. And somehow you're not sure who's winning anymore. The study darkens behind you as you step back into the corridor. No guards follow. No steward trails behind with a list. For once, you walk alone. You make your way toward the royal bedchambers, not yours, not tonight, the Queen's. Her guards nod silently as you approach. One taps gently on the door, then disappears down the hall. The Queen opens it herself. Her expression is unreadable, framed by candlelight and the soft glow of fire behind her. "You came," she says. You say nothing, just step inside. The chamber is warmer than your own, heavier somehow, draped in silks and shadow. The air carries traces of rose and cedar, and that quiet undertone of lavender soap she favours. You remove your cloak. She doesn't move to help. The silence is not cold, not warm, just there. You sit at the edge of the bed. She moves to the hearth and stirs the fire with an iron poker. Sparks jump. Shadows stretch. "There's talk again," she says. "There's always talk." She nods, but this time it's about heirs. You rest your hands on your knees. "We've had this talk." "Not like this," she replies. "Not since Aragon. Not since Bohemia." You inhale slowly. "Do you want to say it, or should I?" She turns. "Do you want to do it, or shall I?" Historians often speculate on the private lives of kings and queens. Were they cold arrangements, dutiful exchanges, or something more complex, dances of power patience and wounded affection? You stand. She steps forward. The silence deepens, not tense, not hesitant, just filled with all the words neither of you will ever say aloud again. You kiss her not out of love, not entirely, but out of need, for legacy, for unity, for the crown. The tapestries flutter as a breeze slides through the window slit. The fire dims, and somewhere beyond these walls someone will soon whisper, "They shared a bed tonight." Whether it's true in heart or only in form, that's not their concern. They need a story. You've just given them one. The air is cooler now, and not just from the open window. Hours have passed since you left the Queen's chamber. You walk again, this time in darkness, deliberately cloaked and alone. Through corridors so familiar you no longer need torchlight to navigate. These halls are older than memory, and at night they whisper back to those who walk them. You descend the side stairs near the chapel, past the old suit of armour no one polishes anymore. You pass a tapestry depicting St. Eustace in a forest he's seen better stitching. Then you step into the outer bailey under the sky. A pale moon rides high, its light pouring over the courtyard in cold silver. The stars above you are sharper here, less weighed down by prayer and smoke. You pull your hood low and walk along the edge of the wall toward the barracks gate. The guards don't recognize you at first. You chose that on purpose. "Evening patrol," you murmur. They nod too quickly, a good sign or a bad one depending on how much you value discipline. You slip into the shadows. This is a habit, one your advisors hate, one your steward always pretends not to know about. But sometimes a king needs to see his castle through a different lens. Not from the throne, not from the high table. From the cracks. You move past the stables. A sleepy horse snorts. A cat darts under a cart. The cobbles are slick with dew. You hear laughter somewhere. Then, nothing. You reach the northern battlement. A sentry leans against the wall, eyes closed, mouth slightly open. A loaf of half-eaten bread rests beside him. You say nothing. You just watch. Historians still argue whether kings truly did this, patrolled their grounds in disguise. Most dismiss it as romantic fiction. But truth hides better in darkness than in daylight. And tonight, truth is very visible. You pick up the soldier's sword leaning upright against the stone and set it gently on his lap. Then knock your knuckles twice against the wall beside his head. He wakes with a violent start, scrambling to his feet, eyes wild. "Don't drop your sword," you say, voice low. He blinks. You lower your hood, and he blinks again harder this time. "Sire." "Eat later, guard now." He nods so fast his helmet rattles. You disappear before he recovers. You circle back along the western edge. Another guard patrols there, humming to himself. A good man. You remember knighting him 2 winters ago after the siege at Wendrim. You pass without comment. Finally, you return to your own wing from the servants' hall, brushing dust from your cloak and shaking off the night air. The castle is quiet again, but not dead. You've seen where it breathes and where it forgets to. You step into your chamber, shrug off the cloak and wash your hands. And as the warm water runs over your fingers, you remember the boy at the gate with the half-eaten bread and eyes full of fear. You make a note to promote him, or at least to post someone beside him, just in case. The candle in your chamber is down to a stub. Its last flickers bounce gently across your desk where a stack of parchments waits in a neat, accusing pile. You'd hoped to avoid this part of the evening. But the kingdom doesn't pause for sleep. You sit and the chair creaks in protest, so do your knees. You reach for the first scroll. Decrees. Land grants, tax adjustments, border clarifications, one very lengthy petition from a village elder who insists their sacred tree is haunted by a monk who whistles at night. You're tempted to send it directly to the royal exorcist just to see what he does with it. You open the inkwell, dip your quill, and begin. Your handwriting isn't elegant, no one expects that, but it's legible and, more importantly, final. Every stroke of your name carries the weight of law. Every signature turns an idea into action. Sometimes a blessing, sometimes a mistake. Tonight's decisions feel heavier than usual. Maybe it's the Bohemian envoy. Maybe it's the Queen's embroidery. Or maybe it's the faint ache in your back that reminds you thrones like stones are not made for comfort. A parchment from the southern coast catches your eye. A report from the portmaster. A foreign ship was detained carrying goods under false markings. Spice from Alexandria, allegedly, but the list includes silver silk and letters in a script that isn't familiar. You frown, mark it for the spymaster. Another scroll, a baron requests permission to build a second watchtower on his land. You know the hill. You also know it faces Langford's border. You set the request aside. Historians sometimes say kings wrote the future by candlelight. It sounds poetic until you've done it half asleep with ink on your sleeves and a headache the size of Normandy. You shift in your seat. A monk sits nearby, his head drooping. He was supposed to help you draft responses. Now he's snoring softly, his nose dangerously close to the candle flame. You slide it away with one finger. He doesn't stir. The fire in the hearth has dimmed. The room is quiet. And still the scrolls wait. You pick up another your cousin's handwriting this time. You recognize the loops, the way he crosses his T's like they've insulted him. It's a request for an audience. Personal. Immediate. You write one word on the bottom. Tomorrow. Your quill scratches on. One decree limits taxes on barley. Another removes tolls on a mountain pass that's more goat path than road. A third confirms your decision to build a new granary near the river despite protest from merchants who say it interferes with the sacred flow of commerce. You yawn, blot the page. Move on. Outside, the wind whistles through the tower slits. Distantly, a bell tolls, the 3rd hour after midnight, or the 2nd. You've stopped keeping track. You dip the quill again, and again, until finally the last scroll is signed, the ink is dry, and the candle gives one last gasp before dying. You lean back, stare at the ceiling, and exhale. A day's worth of law, decided between one blink and the next. You glance toward the window. Dawn is still hours away. Good. You rise, shoulders stiff, and stretch. And as you do, a single thought crosses your mind. May no one ever read these by accident, especially the one about the goat path. It's still dark when you slip out into the corridor again, drawn by the faint, familiar sound of claws on stone and the rhythmic thump of a wagging tail. He's waiting for you near the chapel steps, your dog. Not a warhound, not a prized hunting mastiff, just an old barrel-chested mutt named Ebor who's been at your side since the beginning of your reign. Grey around the eyes, now stiff in the joints, but still watching you like you hold the sun between your fingers. He trots up tail wagging so hard it knocks a broom over. You smile in spite of yourself. Still patrolling, you ass? Ebor gives a small bark. It echoes through the hall. You walk together down the cloister and out to the west balcony, the one that overlooks the courtyard. The world is silent, still cloaked in the deep blue of pre-dawn. You lean on the stone railing. Ebor sits beside you, panting softly. Below, the stable hands are just beginning their work, sweeping hay, hauling water, muttering curses at reluctant mules. Somewhere, a kitchen boy yawns wide enough to swallow the moon and lights the first fire of the day. The scent of smoke and wet earth rises faintly through the air. And Ebor, he licks your boot. Of everyone in this castle, guards, advisors, nobles, even the queen, he's the only one who comes and goes as he pleases, sleeps where he wants, eats whatever's dropped, and somehow still commands more loyalty than half your council. You glance down at him. You've got it figured out, haven't you? He sneezes. Historians never write about the king's dog. No chronicler bothers to mention the creature that sat through council meetings or curled up beside you when you were fevered. But Ebor, he's been there, through wars, through treaties, through nights where you almost lost everything. And he's never asked for more than a warm place to sleep and a piece of roasted chicken now and then. You sit down on the stone step beside him. He immediately lays his head in your lap. You scratch behind his ear and he sighs, loud content and slightly dramatic. You both sit in silence as the first sliver of sun crests over the eastern towers. Light washes over the courtyard, gilding the stones, warming the air, just enough to make the frost on the railings shimmer like jewels. You let it linger on your face. Ebor snores once. And for a brief moment, just one, there is no kingdom. No politics. No heirs. Just a man, a dog, and the quiet hush of morning. Then a voice shatters it. Your Majesty, a guard calls from below. The astrologer has arrived. You groan. Ebor opens one eye. The dog has more peace than you'll ever know. The astrologer waits in the old observatory near the south turret, a round chamber with high, narrow windows and a dome ceiling painted with faded constellations. It smells of beeswax dust, and the nervous sweat of every man who's ever asked the stars to lie for him. You step inside Ebor, trailing behind until the threshold where he stops. Even he knows when things get weird. The astrologer is already bowed low, his robes a tapestry of midnight blue and embroidered moons. You can never tell whether he's deeply mystical or just likes dramatic tailoring. "Sire," he says, straightening, "thank you for coming. The heavens have shifted." You raise an eyebrow. "Shifted where? And do we need to pay them rent?" He doesn't laugh, he rarely does. Instead, he gestures toward a tall wooden ladder leading to the upper platform where the brass astrolabe gleams under the morning sun. You sigh and climb. At the top, you find a table spread with charts, parchments filled with swirling lines, ink blotches and annotations that look less like predictions and more like the angry notes of a sleep-deprived mathematician. "Observe," he says, pointing to a constellation shaped vaguely like a weasel being kicked. You nod slowly. "I see." That he whispers is the serpent's mouth, and it is aligning tonight with the crown of winter. You wait for the dramatic pause. It comes. "This portends betrayal," he says, "a deep one, close to your blood." You stare at the chart, then at him. "Are we quite sure this isn't the alignment that also predicts rain and low crop yields?" He blinks. "That too." You lean forward, scanning the parchment. There are marks circled in red ink. One resembles a crown, the other an eye. "I've seen this before," you murmur. He nods. 3 years ago, before the river revolt. Historians still argue over the accuracy of medieval astrology. Was it science, superstition, political theatre in a star-speckled robe? Whatever the case in your court, people believe in the stars as long as the stars say what they already fear. You point to a scribbled note at the bottom of the chart. "What's this?" He squints. "That's your birth sign, sire. Beneath the archer. It's intersecting now with the sign of the closed door." You lean back, so I should lock mine. "I would," he says, entirely serious. You descend the ladder, leaving the stars behind. Ebor is waiting, tail thumping gently. You pat his head. He looks unimpressed by the cosmos. As you leave, the astrologer calls after you. "Be cautious with whom you trust, Majesty, especially before the third moon rises." You glance up at the sky. "It's Tuesday," you reply. Still the warning lingers. You return to the keep, passing through the upper hallway, eyes scanning every servant, every guard, every face too cheerful or too pale. You're not suspicious by nature, but when a man in star-embroidered robes warns of betrayal, you start paying attention. In the great hall, the fire's been stoked. You find your spy master waiting near the hearth, flipping a dagger in his hand. You raise an eyebrow. "New hobby?" He shrugs. "Better than astrology." You nod slowly. "Maybe. But tonight, let's be cautious. Lock the lower gates. Post a double watch." He nods, already in motion. You glance once more toward the high windows where daylight streams in like spilled gold. You don't believe in omens, but you also don't ignore them. Especially not on Tuesdays. The monastery bell tolls as you approach, deep, sonorous, a sound that drips reverence into the air like honey into wine. You hear it long before you see the stone walls rising beyond the trees, moss-covered and solemn under the morning light. You ride slowly alone, save for a single guard and Ebor trotting faithfully behind. Monastery visits are never officially scheduled. If they were, they'd become performances, and you've had enough of those this week. The monks greet you in silence. One bows low and offers a sprig of lavender for your hand. Tradition. You accept it and tuck it into your belt. The scent is soft, calming, and slightly at odds with your mood. You walk through the cloister, the stone echoing beneath your boots, past rows of silent brothers tending to herbs and copying scripture. The air smells of beeswax ink and overcooked root vegetables. The abbot waits for you near the chapel, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and unspoken worries. Majesty, he greets you, voice calm but alert. The Lord's peace be upon you. And also with your potatoes, you reply, gesturing toward a nearby pot steaming over a fire. I can smell the penance from here. He chuckles. We add salt now when we're feeling indulgent. You sit beneath the ivy-covered arch near the well while he joins you with a pitcher of water and 2 wooden cups. You didn't come to taste our stew? He says. No, you admit. I came for silence. He nods, a rare thing these days. Almost as rare as loyalty. His brow lifts slightly, but he doesn't comment. You pour water. It tastes of stone and cold clarity. I'm being watched, you say softly. Everyone in your position is. No, you add, I mean watched closely, carefully. Like a deer in a garden, not a king in a keep. The abbot folds his hands. And you're hoping to find truth here. Not truth, you say, perspective. He considers you for a moment, then glances toward the chapel. Come. You rise and follow him inside. The space is dim, lit only by morning shafts of sun slanting through coloured glass. Dust dances in the beams like motes of prayer. He leads you to a small alcove where a single page of parchment sits on a wooden stand. The ink is old-faded but legible. You recognise the script immediately, your father's hand. A letter, the abbot explains, left for you years ago. You blink. You've kept this all this time. He nods. He asks that it be given only if you came alone. You approach slowly. Your heart thuds once heavier than usual. You read. If you are reading this, it means the crown has begun to feel heavier than your skin. You pause. There will come a day when you look around your court and wonder which voice is real. On that day, remember this. The throne is not yours. You are its steward, yet your life, your pride, your ambition, they serve something older than you and something wiser than any advisor. Do not try to outsmart the throne. Do not try to love it, carry it, with honour, with suspicion, and with care this year. The kingdom will not reward your faith, but it may survive it. You finish reading. The silence presses in. Ebor lies at your feet, chin on paws, tail still. You hand the letter back. The abbot folds it carefully. He feared you would grow too comfortable, or too paranoid. You smile faintly. What a choice. He bows slightly. Come again, Majesty. The garden will always be here. You nod and turn to leave. As you mount your horse and look once more at the quiet stones, you feel something shift, not weight, not clarity. Just awareness. The kind you only get when God's voice sounds suspiciously like your father's handwriting. By the time you return to the castle, the sky is bruising with dusk. The clouds hang low, tinged with gold and ash, like the last embers of a fire that once threatened to burn the heavens. The moment your boots hit the courtyard stones, the steward is at your elbow. Your Majesty, the treasurer awaits in the counting room. Of course he does. Because nothing says welcome home from spiritual reflection like discussing debt. You follow the steward through the western passage past the armoury and down a flight of spiral stairs that always smell like old leather dust and numbers. Ebor tries to follow, but you signal him to wait. Even a loyal dog deserves mercy. The counting room is small, windowless, and unnaturally dry. It's filled with parchment ledgers, ink pots, and anxiety. The royal treasurer. Lord Hadric stands beside an open chest, frowning into its contents like it just insulted his mother. "Majesty," he says, bowing slightly, "we've here reviewed the northern accounts again." "And?" He gestures. "It appears we've counted the same shipment of silver 3 times, due to an enthusiastic scribe who copied over previous entries without noting the year." You stare at him. "In short," he continues, "we have less money than we thought, significantly less." "How significantly?" Hadric pulls out a scroll, hands it to you, then clears his throat. "We are metaphorically rich, Your Majesty." You scan the document. Debts, loans, unpaid tariffs, and a troubling note about stolen toll payments along the river road. And then at the bottom, a request from the coin master to mint smaller currency to encourage optimism. You set the scroll down. How much gold is in the treasury right now? Hadric opens the chest beside him. Inside 3 crowns, some silver cups, and what appears to be a half-eaten apple wrapped in cloth. "This isn't the treasury, you say." He sighs, it is now. Historians often exaggerate royal wealth piles of gold overflowing coffers. The truth is a king's fortune depends heavily on who owes you money and whether they've decided to remember that. You pace slowly around the room. "Show me the ledgers for Langford." Hadric hesitates. Langford hasn't paid levies in full for 2 seasons, but he sends generous gifts. Horses, wine, a tapestry of St. George with disturbingly long legs. You nod, so he buys loyalty instead of taxes. Some would call it investment. You smile thinly. Some would call it treason. He opens another chest, this one filled with documents instead of false hope. Inside, a record of debts owed to the crown. A long list of names, some loyal, some suspect, all essential. Begin collections, you say. Start with the ones who smile too much. He nods. You turn to leave, then pause at the door. "And the gold coins we do have, how many are real?" He grimaces, "We're checking." You don't wait for more. Back upstairs, the castle glows with firelight. Servants light candles. Guards shift posts. The scent of bread and roasted roots wafts from the kitchens. But all you can smell is ink and dust. You pass the great hall and glance up at the stained glass window depicting your great-grandfather blessing a merchant's ship. You wonder if that ship ever came back. You wonder if the gold it carried ever existed. And you wonder how long a crown can shine when its chest is empty. The sky is sinking fast now, the day drawing its final breath. You make your way to the front gatehouse, not because of war or diplomacy, but for something far more delicate smiling. Tonight, you're expected to walk among your people. It's ceremonial, of course, a show of presence, a reminder that the crown still beats beneath the skin of the kingdom. And if you're lucky, no one throws anything. As you approach the outer courtyard, the guards are already in formation. Horns sound low and polite, not the battle kind. Children gather behind the bakery carts, women clutch infants, and a dog you don't recognize chases a chicken through the crowd. It's chaos. It's perfect. You mount the wooden steps built for these exact occasions, the platform overlooking the town square where a mix of admiration and lice rises to greet you. A herald shouts your titles. All of them, twice. You smile, wave slowly, and nod like a man who doesn't know that the treasury is half empty and a foreign envoy just tried to marry his sister. The people cheer. Some wave cloth scraps. Others bow too low and too fast. You see familiar faces: blacksmiths, cobblers, fishwives, a drunk you vaguely recall knighting during a festival several years ago. He's still wearing the tabard, upside down. You descend into the crowd, 2 guards flanking you close, but not too close. This is theatre, the illusion of intimacy. A woman offers a loaf of bread. You take it. It's warm, heavy, and smells of fennel. She looks up at you and says, "Thank you for keeping the roads safe." You don't respond. You simply place a hand over your heart. A boy thrusts a carved wooden horse at you. You kneel, briefly take it, and hand him the silver brooch from your collar. He gasps. His mother faints. Or maybe she just sits suddenly. Historians rarely describe these moments, but this strange, clumsy dance between power and people is what holds kingdoms together more than any war treaty ever could. As you walk, you hear murmurs. They say the Queen is with child. Langford's army bought new spears. I saw the king's dog wearing a crown. You smile at that last one. You reach the fountain at the centre of the square. A boy is climbing it. You make eye contact with the guard beside you. "No, you say, let him." The boy reaches the top and shouts, "Long live the king!" His voice echoes across the cobblestones. The crowd cheers again, loud, uncoordinated, honest. You stand there for a moment longer, bathed not in glory but in recognition. These people don't know the details, the debts, the whispers, the looming tension behind silk curtains. But they know you. And sometimes that's enough. You return to the castle as the sun bleeds into the horizon. Your steward meets you at the inner gate, quill in hand. "Your Majesty, tomorrow's schedule." "Later, you say." He hesitates. "The ambassador from Aragon wishes to..." "Later." You walk past him. Back to the tower. Back to your room. Where no one claps, no one bows. Only the crown waits. Silent. Heavy. Exactly where you left it. You're halfway through unlacing your boots when the coughing starts. Not yours. Someone's in the great hall, a wet, ragged sound echoing across stone. You pause, listen, hear it again. Short, desperate, then a shout, then silence. You pull your boots back on and head for the source. By the time you reach the hall, 2 guards are already blocking the door. One glances back. "Sire, you may want to wait." You push past them. Inside the room is mostly cleared from the evening's bustle. The torches gutter in their sconces' shadows, stretched long and uncertain. On the floor near the long table, a servant kneels, head bowed, arms shaking. A physician hovers beside her, dabbing her forehead with cloth soaked in vinegar. "What happened, you ask?" The physician straightens. She collapsed while cleaning, fevered, coughing blood. You look down. There it is, red already drying on the floor. Your throat tightens, not from fear, from memory. 3 years ago, you lost 2 nights as steward and your best cook in a single week to a fever that crept through the halls like smoke. You thought it was over. You were wrong. "Quarantine," you say quietly. "Now, seal the servants' quarters. Restrict movement. No entry without my order." The physician bows. "At once, Majesty." You turn to the guards, summon the royal apothecary, and find the Queen's healer. Wake them if you have to. They run. You kneel beside the girl. She's young, maybe 16. Her lips are cracked, her skin clammy. Her eyes flutter open, catch yours, then close again. She whispers something you can't hear. You place a hand on her shoulder. She doesn't flinch. Historians always mention the Black Death, the Great Plagues, these sweeping scythes of illness across nations. But they forget this, the quiet terror of the first case. The moment you realize your walls don't protect against breath, that your titles mean nothing to microbes. You rise and wipe your hand on your cloak. Later, that cloak will be burned. You return to your chamber through the service stairwell. It's quieter there, colder. You pass a window slit and pause. The moon is still high. And you once again are reminded that kings don't sleep. They wait for storms. At your door, your spy master is already waiting. You heard you say. He nods. I've seen it before. You exhale slowly. Tell the guards. Double rotations. No visitors past dusk. He lingers a second longer. If it spreads. It won't. He bows and disappears. You shut your chamber door and strip the cloak from your shoulders, letting it fall to the floor. You light a fresh candle with shaking fingers. In the flickering glow, your crown sits quietly on the table, watching, unmoving, untouched. You stare at it for a long time. Then blow out the light. Morning comes earlier than you expect, grey, reluctant and edged with tension that clings to your breath like frost. You don't dress in full regalia today. No velvet, no gilded chain. Just a tunic, dark wool and boots that haven't been polished in a week. It's not that you don't care. It's that appearances feel irrelevant when death might already be inside your walls. You walk into the council chamber without a word. Your advisors are already seated, their expressions unusually stiff. No one is late today. No one dares. At the far end of the table, your cousin is pouring wine for the ambassador from Aragon. The ambassador declines politely. Your cousin drinks for both of them. The Queen is here too, seated by the window embroidery forgotten in her lap. She meets your gaze briefly. You can tell she already knows. Status, you ask. The steward clears his throat. The servant girl passed just before sunrise. 2 others in her corridor are now showing symptoms. How many exposed? We're not sure yet, the Chancellor says grimly. Dozens likely, maybe more. You nod. Then no one leaves the castle. A few shift uncomfortably. No exceptions, you add. The ambassador raises a hand delicately. With all due respect, Your Majesty, my presence here is... You cut him off with a glance. Safe passage can only be granted when I know what we're dealing with. Until then, you represent Aragon just as well from a quarantined chamber. He bows stiffly, understood. Your cousin chuckles softly, swirling his goblet. Well, this feast just got livelier. You say nothing, but you file that laugh away. You've heard it before, right before he tried to charm his way into an engagement with your sister, and again when he made that disastrous wager during last winter's tournament. It's the laugh of a man who thinks the game is already won. Post guards at every exit, you say. Have the food inspected. Wash every surface with lye. The physician nods, already begun. Your spymaster speaks from the corner. There's more. Of course there is. We intercepted a message last night. Disguised in a barrel of dried figs meant for the kitchens, the seal was Langford's. You turn slowly. What did it say? The spymaster unfolds a thin scrap of parchment. You can barely read the words, but the handwriting is clear, tight, angular, written in haste. The king will be weakened by fear. Act when the doors close. Your cousin sets down his goblet, too softly. The queen doesn't blink. Historians often romanticize royal betrayal daggers behind tapestries, goblets laced with poison, betrayal sealed with kisses, but the truth is quieter, slower. A look held too long. A word said too easily. You lean forward, hands steepled. Close the inner gates, you say, no movement without my seal, and bring Langford to me, in chains. But your cousin begins. You raise one eyebrow. He closes his mouth. The council ends. The chairs scrape softly across the floor as they rise, each bowing slightly lower than usual. Fear makes people polite. You remain behind. Alone. Until the queen speaks. Your cousin will run, she says, still by the window. You nod. He's not as subtle as he thinks. He's faster than he looks, though. You glance at her. Should I be worried? She threads a needle without looking at you. Only if you hesitate. You stand. And as you leave, you realize something strange. You don't feel tired. You feel ready. Let them scheme. You're still the king. The castle feels different now. It's subtle, like someone shifted the weight of the stones when you weren't looking. The guards stand straighter, but their eyes dart more. Servants whisper louder when they think no one is listening. Doors creak where they shouldn't. Footsteps echo longer than they used to. You walk through the inner court in silence, flanked by two guards whose hands hover a little too close to their sword hilts. The queen has already sealed her wing. Your sister is in the chapel under heavy watch, and your cousin. Gone. No farewell, no protest, no apology. Just a locked chamber, a broken window latch, and a trail of footprints in the dew leading toward the stables. The guards at the southern gate swear they saw nothing. They won't be guards much longer. You pass through the old war gallery lined with banners of past victories, faded shields, rusted swords too dull to remember who they once struck. You pause beneath the tattered blue and silver of your grandfather's banner. He survived 3 assassination attempts and a siege that lasted half a year. You plan to do better. In the outer courtyard, your spymaster waits, hooded, still. Any word? He nods once. The cousin fled south, met with 2 riders near the old mill, headed into Langford's territory. You clench your jaw. I want the roads sealed, the forests watched. No birds fly without permission. He bows and vanishes. You know what comes next. You head to the old war room, a chamber you haven't entered since the Wendrim standoff. The table inside is already cleared. The map awaits landmarks marked in ink, tiny wooden figures scattered like forgotten toys. Langford's sigil, a gold serpent on a black field, sits just north of your border. You stare at it for a long time. Bring in the messengers, you say to your steward. He nods and opens the door. 3 riders enter, dusty, wind-chapped cloaks still dripping from the morning fog. You issue orders quickly. 1 to the western barracks, reinforce the watch. 1 to the river town, restrict movement of Langford's men. One to your allies in the East, prepare. Not for war. Not yet. But for the possibility of one. Historians call these moments precursors, signals, the unraveling thread that later becomes the banner of war. But in the moment, it doesn't feel grand. It feels quiet, focused, a page turning too slowly. As the messengers ride out, your steward hesitates by the door. "Sire," he says, "if I may." You wave him in. He hands you a sealed note. The wax is unfamiliar, deep green marked with a single star. You open it. The note is short. Langford moves not for conquest, but for cleansing. He believes your blood is already spoiled. No signature. You reread it twice, then burn it in the hearth. You return to your chamber before the sun fully rises. Ebor follows tail down, sensing your mood. You sit at your desk and stare at the crown. You haven't worn it in days. You pick it up now, just to feel the weight. And for the first time since your coronation, it feels light. Not because it's easier, but because you finally understand why it must be heavy. You sit at the edge of your bed, the crown resting loosely in your lap. Outside, the torches flicker in their sconces. The castle hums in that strange pre-dawn stillness, the hour when everyone is technically asleep, yet no one truly rests. Then comes a knock. Soft, barely audible, but deliberate. You rise quietly and open the door. A priest stands there, older hunched face, weathered like old oak. Father Marek. You've seen him at court for years. You've heard him bless soldiers before battle, whisper comfort, at bedsides deliver homilies that manage to shame and soothe all at once. "Majesty," he says with a bow, "I'm here for your confession." You frown. "Who sent for you?" "No one." He meets your gaze, "but I know the signs." You step aside. He enters. You sit across from each other by the fire, which crackles with soft approval. Neither of you speaks for a long while. Finally, he asks, "When was your last—" You think, 2 winters ago, after the Wendrim rebellion. He nods. You asked forgiveness for sending men to die. And for not saving the ones I could. His eyes are steady. What weighs on you now? You hesitate. Not because you don't know, but because you finally do. That I trust no one you say. That I've learned to love silence more than advice. That I see my family as pawns, my people as a tide, and my crown as both shield and prison. He nods once slowly. That's the confession of a ruler. I don't want to be just a ruler. Then you must remember he says that kings are not just men in high towers. They are stories, living, breathing ones. The people follow the story, not just the man. You look into the fire. I fear I have become the villain in someone else's version. You have, he says simply. We all do. But villains are remembered just as sharply. You laugh softly, not comforting. No, but honest. Historians don't record most confessions. The ones that happen in shadow, without incense, without ritual. The ones not spoken to God, but to another human, willing to carry part of the burden. I fear I am alone, you admit quietly. You are, he agrees, but not unloved. You say nothing. After a moment he stands. Forgiveness doesn't mean release, he says, but it can mean clarity. You nod. He bows again, then steps out into the corridor. The door shuts gently behind him. You sit for a while. Then you rise, move to the writing desk. You take a fresh scroll, unroll it, and write. Not a decree. Not a strategy. Just a letter. To no one, to everyone. To whatever part of yourself still believes in things without conditions. You write until the sun touches the edge of the window. Then you fold the letter, seal it, and tuck it into the lining of your cloak. Later someone may find it. Later someone may finally understand you. But for now it's enough that you understand yourself. The final light of dawn spills across the flagstones like molten silver as you step onto the high battlement, the tallest point in your castle. The wind greets you first brisk sharp, full of early autumn's bite. It tugs at your cloak and rustles the crown in your hand. You've climbed these steps alone. No guards. No advisors. No hound. Just you. And the view. From up here, your kingdom unfurls in all directions, the distant hills where farmers coax barley from reluctant earth, the forests hiding both deer and secrets, the winding river that cuts through the eastern plains like a vein of steel. Smoke rises from chimney clusters in the village below. The blacksmith's bellows breathe. A child runs across the square, trailing a scarf twice his height. A fisherman rows upriver with the kind of patience only earned through loss. And beyond it all, Langford's hills. Small quiet, but watching you, just as you watch them. You've stood here before. After your coronation. After your first battle. After your father's death. Each time the world below looked different. Not because it changed, but because you had. Today is no different. You set the crown on the stone beside you, not discarded, not defied, just acknowledged. Symbol, a burden, a promise. You inhale the chill air, it burns a little, sharpens your lungs. Then softly footsteps behind you. You don't turn, you already know who it is. The Queen stands beside you, hands clasped, hair swept back by the wind. No counsel today, she asks. Only the important one, you reply. She nods, the one with yourself. You smile faintly. He's difficult. I married him. You both fall into silence. Not the tense kind. Not the political kind. Just silence. Companionable, worn, real. Below the castle comes to life. The gates creak open. Merchants call out wares. A bell rings. Pigeons scatter. You've done well, she says quietly. You're the first person to say that this week. You don't need to hear it, she replies. It is, but it's true. Historians will write of your battles, your reforms, your betrayals and bargains. They'll remember the day you rode out against Langford the night the fever struck the treaty you signed with trembling hands. They'll mention your crown. They may not mention this moment, but you will remember it. Because it is not war that proves a king, nor peace, but the choice every day to rise to rule, to remain human. You pick up the crown once more. Its weight is the same. But now so are your shoulders. You turn to her. Let's go down, you say. She smiles. Together. And so you descend. Not just from the tower, but into your story, where history waits, and your people do too. You let the sounds of the castle dim behind your eyes. The voices fade. The crackle of the fire becomes a low whisper in the dark. Even the stiffness in your shoulders, the burn in your legs from the ride, the slight ache of decisions yet to be made, they begin to soften. The flames cast gentle shadows on the ceiling, moving slowly, lazily, as if they too have had their fill of politics and pies. You exhale, long and slow. Your breath leaves you like fog rolling off the moor, warm and calm, drifting away into silence. Somewhere down the hall, a page turns a key in a lock, a torch sputters out, a hound pads quietly across the stone floor, finding its corner by the door. The castle settles as all things do. You pull the fur throw tighter around your shoulders. The velvet lining brushes your chin. The room breathes. And for once, no one is watching. No one is asking. No one is expecting you to decide who gets what land or who's lying about sheep or which cousin is marrying which ambassador's niece. For now, it's just the quiet, the fire, and the gentle hum of sleep pulling you slowly, gently into its arms. Because even kings must rest. Even crowns must cool. And for tonight, just tonight, the realm will survive without your orders. You close your eyes. The darkness welcomes you home.